Ladies, as a feminist, I think women deserve more credit for the Holocaust. Whoa, let's be real here, okay? Overly emotional, funny-looking men yelling at groups of people they don't like only goes so far. You need that feminine touch to soften all that hard, masculine language. And really, this is true of basically anything, from genocide to being angry about video games. Like, what's easier to listen to? Someone who sounds like this?
In our world, yeah, well, guess what? Fucking pronouns! Fucking gender ambiguity! Fucking current day!
Or someone who sounds like this.
This goes so much deeper than a few people or one single studio. It shows a very real rot that has crept into Western gaming over the years. Something cultural and something that has been festering for a long time.
That was from a video talking about the cultural purity of video game developers, by the way. Very cool. In my opinion, one underappreciated piece of history is that women have long been enlisted as moral mediators in many reactionary and fascist movements heralded by men. Such as all of them. From duty-bound Nazi women's Reich leaders to maternal, moralist, anti-feminism zealots to an absolute buffet of modern-day pick-me's, girlbossing, gaslighting, and gatekeeping is and always has been integral to the spread of conservative reactionary ideologies. Also, Israel's been doing this with the IDF to make genocide look cool. Isn't that neat? One of the newer additions to this lineage of class betrayal is in online nerdcore spaces, where women have become useful accessories in validating the very normal opinions of their definitely centrist male counterparts.
Think about how close Kamala Harris came to winning the presidency, and then tell me that democracy is a good idea.
However, it's important to clarify that most of the females engage in this culture as one of the boys, using their feminine forms purely as an aesthetic signal, while their rhetorical approach is on the same spirited masculine reactionary scale of Angie mauling vitriol to I am John objectivity. It's another version of the I'm not like other girls girl. I like video games and men and fascist political pundits and not Disney or feminism or other women. And the background NPC, the person behind that very colorful language at the beginning of my video, is the main case study today on e-girl eugenics. What distinguishes her from the more brash pick-me energy of many of her apolitical counterparts is her intentionally leaning into the calm, doting, and sometimes mournful feminine aesthetic that so many of these other women purposely reject to desperately become one of the previously mentioned boys. Oh, and we are not gender essentialist on this channel, but we are interested in the weaponization of gender norms, including the kind that shoots you with estrogen from a mile away. Subscribe if you want to get shot with estrogen from a mile away. If you don't subscribe, that's gonna happen anyways. She tries to mask the same talking points you've heard a million times over with lamentation and a wholesome, marketable feminine appeal, while of course presenting herself as very reluctant to be political, followed almost immediately by mourning a white supremacist.
While this isn't really a political channel, the truth is very clear that political activism has wedged itself so deeply into our entertainment and gaming spaces that there is basically zero way to avoid it, especially when some of the very people making these games are using their platforms to cheer for things that are downright sickening. Some of the responses I have seen from professionals in this industry, and let's be very real, across many industries, to the devastating assassination of Charlie Kirk have been absolutely depraved.
The entirety of her Twitter feed and channel is about games and movies until Charlie Kirk died, by the way. Like, isn't that a little weird? Like, of all the things to be devastated by, to move your apolitical being to speak out about the effects of violent rhetoric, it's a bunch of people on the internet making assassination jokes about the 21st century Hitler youth leader becoming a victim of the rage farming radicalization machine he spent his life building, and not, oh, I don't know, the school shooting that happened the same day one stayed over. or any others? Ah well. If Charlie Kirk was a random 11-year-old who got murdered by gun violence in a school again, her and no one else apolitical would have cared about him dying, and then I wouldn't get to make this content for you to oh so graciously partake in. There really is silver linings in everything. Anyways, I believe she's a very important gamerly addition to the lineage of women using the disarming visage of femininity to reframe reactionary politics as morality, making ideology sound like common sense through the mouth of someone who is very much a homebody, almost embarrassingly so.
One spoiled apple softens from within. Before you know it, everything around it is infected too.
I predict more people like her are gonna pop up, because they already are. And I'm making this video because y'all need to learn how to recognize that the distribution of fascist and reactionary rhetoric has evolved and become embedded in the most curious of places, like the minds of our precious gamer girls. Anyways, gamer girls are using Nazi speak to talk about video games, and apoliticals are posting Christian nationalist pro-crusade memes, which means it's time for a little history lesson on how we got here. Oh, and fascism is happening today, by the way. Have you turned on the news? Have you read NSPM 7? Bitch. Has anyone else heard of a guy called Hitler? I hear he had some pretty mind-blowing ideas. Gertrude Schultz Klink, who looks like she could defeat a bear in one-on-one combat, is the appointed Reich women's leader, describing women as responsible for ensuring that decency and order prevailed in family and public life. She was generally the driving force for encouraging German women to see themselves not as political actors, but as cultural protectors, a stance that gave moral legitimacy to the regime's policies by naturalizing ideology through the language of purity and duty. Duty. But to Gertrude, these weren't just fluffy ideals. Women were expected to live out this role in very specific ways. In Mothers of the Fatherland by Claudia Kuhn, she describes how female leaders of the National Socialist Women's League organized sewing circles, food drives, and childcare programs that doubled as spaces for political indoctrination. Housewives would distribute leaflets about racial hygiene, they hosted kitchen table talks warning about degenerate influence in schools. Where does that sound familiar? And also ran charity networks that only supported certain kinds of people. And not only excluding Jews, but non-party women, because a consistent theme that you'll be seeing here is there's always a right kind of women. In an interview with Coons, Gertrude proudly proclaimed her influence led to policy change in order to keep her women from donning military uniforms and being sent to die in the front lines like the men. So much for gender equality, am I right, fellow feminists? When Coons pointed out to Gertrude that so many non-party women did get enlisted to die on the battlefield, Gertrude's response was very simply,
"That was not my concern."
Now you may have just thought that I got Gertrude herself to do that line read, but that was actually my friend Coy. Can we just round of a fucking applause. It's like she's in the room here with us. What is more telling, however, is that when Gertrude was asked what got her interested in National Socialism, she said,
"I never cared much for politics, although I supported my husband's views."
Why yes, the Nazi did in fact say she was not political. How curious. After this, she worked to help organize women in Baden to provide social services during the Depression, helping create a subculture that gave certain disaffected Germans a sense of belonging to the Nazi cause. Her insistence that she had specifically never cared for politics, only springing into action out of a sense of morality and duty, is the exact same brand of copium that we see the modern apolitical gamers spew all the time.
All this isn't really a political channel. All this isn't really a political channel. All this isn't really a political channel.
But despite all this work and influence that she apparently had, it's important to note that Big H himself was very abundantly clear who this all was for. Quotes guy, can you hit me with a fat Hitler quote right now?
No, I don't know if I want to do the Hitler accent. I've got Jewish ancestry. He killed a lot of my relatives, and my nonna had to flee Italy because of his buddy Mussolini. I don't know if it's a good idea. The Nazi Revolution will be an entirely male event.
Wow, it's like Hitler's in the room with us. Amazing. Now, despite Hitler's obvious intention here, women's quiet authority was pretty deeply important to the revolution itself, with their soft voices continually working in the background to build up these moral foundations which lent legitimacy to the harder denunciations of the big boy male leaders. This rhetorical strategy worked because it dovetailed with broader cultural campaigns that pathologized dissent, as well as the creation of cultural aesthetic works that were considered aberrant. That means art that wasn't Nazi enough. The 1937 Degenerate Art Exhibition in Munich invited citizens to scorn modernist works. Hitler himself condemned artists for making works depicting
the human being only in a state of putrefaction,
and for presenting
deformed idiots as representatives of manly strength.
That disavowal of art that has perceived amoral characteristics certainly seems a little bit familiar. This language of rot and decay resonated precisely because women's organizations were already primed to translate ideology into moral duty. They taught citizens to see cultural impurity as a literal threat to health and decency. And together, these moves reinforced the idea that politics was not politics at all, but a fight for cultural health, beauty, and purity. Boy, isn't that awful? Time portal to the next section. I love a good time portal, but I just wish that I had a straight shot here instead of having a layover at the beginning of time. That cat's wearing a hat. That's funny. Phyllis Schlafly, who looks like she has never thought a nice thing about a black person in her entire life, was well known for her ability to cast anti-feminism and other reactionary talking points as simple common sense.
Feminists always talk about liberation. Well, I say we need liberation from the feminists. The average American woman has enough common sense to know that her marriage and motherhood are the most fulfilling role she can have.
Which you still hear a lot today if you pay attention.
By the way, am I, do you guys feel the same way? Am I the only person? Because I feel like this is the common sense take to have. Whereas if you're new, you're not going to have that same type of insight. I mean, that's common sense, man. It's such a, this is the thing. It's so common sense.
Shout out to Max Morrow and his really good common sense video that I shamelessly stole that montage from. He's really cool. You should watch his video. Yes. Similarly to our homegirl Gertrude, Phyllis rejected the idea that she was a political activist of sorts, instead positioning herself as a defender of women's natural-born rights. Shout out gender essentialism. In a 1972 speech, she famously declared,
"What I am defending is the real rights of women. A woman should have the right to be in the home as a wife and mother."
You guys are not gonna believe this, but actually, that was my friend Coy again, and not the real Phyllis Schlafly. It's just amazing. The bountiful talent in this man is, astounding. Using moralistic language like that, Schlafly reframed anti-feminism not as a regressive attack on women in response to them actually getting agency in their lives, but as a form of protection of the family, of tradition, and of women's definitely natural roles to basically be birthing slaves. The power of this strategy was that it allowed her to appear non-ideological while advancing a deeply ideological agenda, like what every single one of these bozos tries to do.
Feminism is doomed to failure because it is based on an attempt to repeal and restructure human nature.
It's just natural. It's just how women are. How can what I'm saying be political in any way if it's literally the objective truth of the world? Me to my boss at work all the time. This is the logic, by the way, behind why reactionaries and gamers, men and women alike, rally against the scary F word, because it's seen as going against nature itself. Oh, and ignore the fact that their ideal women seem to paradoxically look unnatural, like out of a 14-year-old horn dog's imagination, or is a child. But that's not important, because what is important is that they believe that that character would have sex with them. As someone who likes sex a lot, I can understand why they want that, because it's really cool and very fun. Hey Siri. What's sex? Schlafly's rhetoric was a continuation of a model already established by conservative women's groups during the Cold War. Historian Michelle Nickerson documents in Mothers of Conservatism that grassroots mothers regularly mobilized through warnings of communist infiltration in schools, libraries, and Hollywood films. Boy, does that sound familiar. They circulated pamphlets, they hosted meetings, framed of course not as partisan politics, but simple maternal vigilance. And all of these things gave their activism legitimacy precisely because it was masked in maternal identity. They were not radicals, they were mothers protecting their children. What Schlafly did was she inherited this model and then was able to scale it nationally. Schlafly distributed flyers, just like her predecessors, warning against the ERA and the women's liberationists taking away special rights women enjoy because they don't want her women to serve in the military. Boy, doesn't that sound familiar? This is the consistent rhetorical strategy. Recast political struggle as a matter of family protection and natural-born rights, with women claiming the moral authority to safeguard home and tradition. By situating herself as the calm maternal defender of real rights, Schlafly made anti-feminism sound apolitical and even benevolent. And also she told women not to think about their place in society and the future because they were literally born to not do that.
Men are philosophers. Women are practical, and 'twas ever thus. Men may philosophize about how life began and where we are heading. Women are concerned about feeding the kids today.
She also victim blames sexual assault victims.
Sexual harassment on the job is not a problem for virtuous women.
I'd love to keep playing you banger Schlafly quotes, but we got more shit to cover, so time portal. I really wish there was a bathroom in this place. Ah, modernity, you fickle little bitch. The thing that everyone hates unless it caters to their narrow worldview centered in the past being better because they are too lazy to spend time developing personal taste. I'm sure you, the astute fat-assed student of mine who is definitely subscribed, have noticed that much of the tactics and strategies I have spoken about sound awfully familiar if you have paid attention to literally anything in the world. The advent of a digital culture has allowed so many of these tried and true reactionary ball-gargling techniques to have re-emerged in new forms and allowed this rhetoric to spread more uninhibited than it ever has been before, because humanity is not responsible enough to have the internet. What the fuck is this? What are we doing? What are we doing? People like Tradwife influencers, for example, often soft-spoken women posting about homemaking, modest fashion, and religious devotion, are a well-known modern expression of this rhetorical continuity, embedding traditionalist and oftentimes explicitly far-right politics into the most boring lifestyle content I have ever seen. Like, who the fuck looks miserable making cupcakes? Like, I fucking love making cupcakes, bro. Also, the drip. Like, pray for a better wardrobe. Their success and popularity comes not from overt confrontation, but from aestheticizing politics as wholesome, nurturing, and apolitical, leaning explicitly on the biological essentialism we've seen time and time again. Similarly, in the recent pastel QAnon wave that has cursed the planet with its existence, in which QAnon conspiracies are rebranded through pastel color palettes, inspirational quotes, and curious hashtags. Instead of dark warnings, these accounts share posts and memes about protecting children, spiritual wellness, positive living, which result in radical conspiracy theories becoming approachable and even comforting, especially to mothers and young women. God forbid women have a space just for themselves. Am I right, ladies? And then of course, in this nightmare realm, we have our beloved gamer sphere that we all know and endure, thrust into relevance by the now eternal societal scar that is known as Gamergate. It has nestled snugly in this new age digital reactionary hellscape with females that go to bat for the biggest dorks advocating for the lamest shit you've ever heard in your life. Anyways, as for the ladies, whether they're literal active conservative pundits or just random people who kind of lucked into clout on social media, these women's presence is integral to keeping this reactionary machine well-oiled in the imaginary feminist tiers that they believe keep it functioning. There needs to be women part of these movements to sanitize the messages of the unwashed screaming masses, and the men are absolutely aware of this.
There's a lot of like men doing YouTube, and it comes across very differently when a woman echoes what the men are trying to say. It's like, yes, thank you, female person, for saying what a male is saying. Yes, thank you for not falling in line with what the industry tells you should say.
They are continually trying to recruit and take advantage of women's problems that they created to red pill them or whatever. Like this guy trying to convince himself that the recent instance of a big female streamer being assaulted in open at TwitchCon will somehow convert her to his side. Like, I really don't know. I truly don't know what he's thinking. All of these colorful examples show how affect and aesthetic framing from the messenger can sanitize extreme ideas in the message. By embedding politics in essentialist ideas of beauty, purity, and common sense, radical messages appear as simple truth or even moral duty. Shout out Gertrude. And this is a core of reactionary, authoritarian, and fascist rhetoric that people, I think, are woefully unprepared to recognize in these tumultuous modern times. It's very easy to look in the past and go, that's an authoritarianism, that's a fascism, at least it should be, shout out our asmongold, but not only are times quite different due to us being connected to a giant propaganda machine 24/7, but how we are taught about the rise and fall of these previous reactionary and fascist regimes of the past are massively oversimplified, with a lot of nuance missing as to how they even happened in the first place. Shout out the American education system. Fascism isn't a bunch of guys like the dude on Jubilee going, yup, I'm a fascist, here to do some fascism. It's a process with a lot of different pieces that can be mixed and matched like a clothes on a doll that will result in fascism when the already intrinsically violent processes of capitalism are taken to the extreme. I might be in the past right now, but I can feel many people in the future hitting the dislike button and typing dirty leftist after I finish that last sentence. Oh, powerful. Fascism is complicated, annoying, and slow. Like me, making it very easy to get sucked in or lie to people about your participation and say that everything is just hunky-dory fine. And this underappreciated feminine cutesy part of that process is what and who we really need to talk about right now. This is a big day for all the women haters in the audience. I'm finally hating on women after defending them for so long. I hope you're happy. The rhetorical force of the YouTuber thebackgroundnpc's commentary comes less from the originality of her arguments than from the way she redeploys familiar strategies of cultural reaction for gamers who entertain the idea of banning women from participating in game development altogether. And to be clear, what I'm about to outline here in Gamer Gertrude's content can be very easily applied to almost all of these other people minus the cutesy aesthetic, regardless of what pronouns they do or do not use. Her videos feel as sermonesque as they do repetitious. They frequently begin with some cutesy or concerned disarming disclaimer of neutrality, move into metaphors warning of deteriorating cultural health, scaffold that with common sense framing of blatant ideological moralization, throw in some curiously phrased double standards, and then culminate in an assurance of some version of an impending moral victory by normal people. Oh yeah, plus she uses scripture when convenient for the message.
John 8:12. Again, Jesus spoke to them saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life.
I'm sure that the man at the head of the massive lucrative hate speech corporation needed those words of the Lord and not the dead kids. Oh boy, class, who's ready to watch a gamer girl apply all of the reactionary and fascist rhetorical strategies we've been learning about? I know I am. A lot of this person's videos have some variation of the same seemingly modest disclaimer, like the one at the beginning of her Kirk jerk video.
While this isn't really a political channel, the truth is very clear that political activism has wedged itself so deeply into our entertainment and gaming spaces that there is basically zero way to avoid it.
It's the same tale about the reluctance of an ordinary woman pushed into speaking about politics by extraordinary circumstances. By disavowing politics, she marks herself as neutral, commonsensical, and trustworthy to the enlightened gamer / Charlie Kirk stan, particularly with that heartbroken tone Slee is just slathering on with every single word. She frequently invokes terminologies like normal people,
and it leaves every normal person asking the same haunting question, how did we get here?
Throughout her content to continually re-emphasize her side as the default and moral while marking the other side as aberrant, using terms like
modern ideology,
and
political activism.
If you have actually been taking a shot for every dog whistle this time, you're probably dead and I am not legally responsible. This implying of an in-group and out-group through framing morals as common sense is necessary to build that foundation of credibility.
We do not need everyone in this industry to agree politically. That has never been realistic and it has never been the goal. What we do need is something far more basic: human decency.
Remember the previous ladies doing the exact same shit. Our favorite women's right leader said she was not being political, merely responding to grief, duty, and circumstance. The final boss of white women, Phyllis Schlafly, was not ideological, but simply defending women's real rights. By speaking in the language of rights and protection, our fascist gamer girls of the past and present reframe their reactionary moralization not as an attack, but as a defense of family, of tradition, of normalcy, and of women's supposedly natural roles. And the background NPC produces this rhetorical genealogy exactly. Another example is in this video, Are They Gaslighting Us?, in which she actively warps reality to insist she is on the defensive.
I think we're all being gaslit pretty hard at this point. There used to be a time when you could generally trust what the industry professionals were telling you. When a studio said they hadn't changed something, they hadn't changed it. But somewhere along the way, that started to change.
Allow me to just break down real quick what this clip is in response to so you can understand how folks like this actively make up narratives to fit their moral positioning. See, in this video, Gamer Gertrude is quite perturbed that CD Projekt Red is lying about saying that they didn't change Ciri's face in The Witcher 4, despite the fact that they also said they made subtle changes to her face. Why would they hide that they fixed her ugly face that so many gamers seem to think that she had? Well,
I immediately noticed a difference in her design, and I remember thinking, oh wow, they actually listened to fan feedback and refined her design. That's a little bit surprising. Then, not even a few hours later, CD Projekt Red tells press that they hadn't changed her, besides 2 very minor adjustments. And basically that what I was seeing with my own eyes wasn't actually what I was seeing.
this lady completely distorts the context around these 2 quotes to build a narrative of conspiracy surrounding game developers literally just doing their jobs. Also, beauty and moralization, but more on that later.
At this point, I've seen all the talking points, even from CD Projekt Red themselves: lighting, camera angles, cinematics versus the tech demo rendering.
She intentionally morphs this perfectly normal development scenario to cast herself as the perfectest, specialist little guy who wanted nothing more than to just enjoy games, but has been pushed into vigilance by all of these corrupt actors, modern ideology, and political activists lying to her. Similarly, in her "Disney does not want you watching this" video, she goes even further, explicitly aligning herself with an imagined mass of ordinary normal people against ideologically corrupt elites.
For years now, mainstream entertainment has become more about correcting and grounding the audience instead of just entertaining them.
We just want to be entertained. We don't want to be corrupted. We don't want to be grounded. Foreshadowing. Because real entertainment doesn't have any political messaging. It just has the objective truths of the world in it. In each case like this, a denial of politics itself becomes the foundation of credibility, a claim to neutrality that enables the smuggling of deeply ideological arguments under the guise of common sense, protection, and cultural health. And this neutrality is deeply important to establish because it is necessary in framing everything that goes into making all of these things they don't like as bad and stinky as possible. Once the ever-important neutrality is established, the central metaphor always slides right on in.
It shows a very real rot that has crept into Western gaming over the years. Something cultural and something that has been festering for a long time. And that's the thing about rot. It creeps in very quietly and slowly. One spoiled apple softens from within. Before you know it, everything around it is infected too.
Remember, by the way, this rhetoric is specifically about some game developers making jokes about the millionaire racist killed by his own trolley problem. Rot is slow, insidious, and contagious. Studios are not simply mismanaged, they are diseased. And by using this organic metaphor, she creates cultural critiques as a matter of health, infection, and actual survival. The rhetoric in her Kirkle Jerk video is the most brazen she's become about the implication of infection producing morally compromised art, but it really echoes throughout her other content, such as...
To be completely honest, at this point, I'm pretty done with Disney, Pixar, and just Hollywood in general, because on top of all the low-quality stories, forced messaging, and modernized regurgitations,
as well as...
Disney has been extremely intentional about all of this. It is the result of a modern ideology that says traditional masculine heroes and the values that they represent are inherently wrong and oppressive.
Oh, and just to further emphasize the weird pandering to men, here's the other half of that last quote.
And to get even more specific, these changes were not about inclusion or diversity at all. It was about rejection of men, of masculinity, of masculine strength, of men being leaders, intelligent, honorable, competitive.
She's talking about men in Star Wars, bro. Like, are we still in 2018? Why are we still having this discourse? Here, the implication of corruption is implicitly fused with ideology. It's not that studios and movies and games are failing due to corporate mismanagement and oversaturation and people at the top being data-obsessed morons, but that political actors are intentionally spreading cultural contamination through wasting hundreds of millions of dollars to make garbage to force feminize the men and make women lesbians. I wish that's what they were doing, because that'd be way fucking cooler. Content in this genre, and boy is there a lot of it, serves to function as a digital version of the degenerate art exhibition. It is intentionally vilifying art on purely moralistic grounds. The Last Jedi was a good movie. We're not having this discussion again. Just as the Nazis cast modernism as infection of a cultural body, the background NPC and ilk invoke the exact same modernist scaremongering which cast Western studios as an orchard that has been corrupted from within. She really loves this terminology like a whole lot.
A modern ideology, forced messaging and modernized regurgitations, modern ideologies, modernization and punishment. Modern ideology, poorly executed modern ideology, the West had Western flops, Western gaming, Western games, political activism, politics.
And also like the Nazis, they both insist that unchecked decay will spread outward, demanding vigilance and a cure to solve this problem.
They are putting coworkers at risk, they are creating hostile environments, and just like rot, if they are allowed to stay and fester, they will continue to spread dysfunction and decay everywhere that they go.
If this isn't a literal open call for a purge, I don't know what the fuck is.
We do not need everyone in this industry to agree politically.
Again, to reiterate, because it's fucking stupid, there's so much vitriol in one sentence for a bunch of dorks on Blue Sky making jokes about Charlie Kirk dying. Does she have problems with George Floyd's murder? Does she have problems with the blatant abuse of presidential authority? Does she have problems with ICE? Does she have problems with the genocide in Palestine? Or is it only white supremacists that she seems to sympathize with? I don't know. She's never said anything else. Oh, and if you think I'm exaggerating about the literal call for purges, just you wait, because she makes that quite clear later on. The next move in this Rube Goldberg machine of fascism is to strip suspect art of its legitimacy. For her and others like her, Western studios have stopped producing genuine games and instead manufacture ideological vehicles.
We have been seeing this sprout up in Western games for years now, especially within AAA. That kind of culture doesn't create great games. It creates echo chambers. It creates propaganda disguised as games.
This framing intentionally delegitimizes entire genres of work, because if games are propaganda, they are unworthy of respect, play, or purchase because they are not art. She frequently doubles down and re-emphasizes this point elsewhere.
Writers are more interested in cramming in a modern ideology they find important, often accompanied by bad or lazy writing, rather than just telling a great story and making us care about characters organically.
Again, this is the exact same fear-mongering in various forms of conservative anti-modernist campaign. And this is especially effective when you can point at specific people to put the blame on. Much of her energy in her Kirk videos and scenarios like this is devoted to specifically cataloging individuals and studios who she deems corrupted. She calls out developers at Sucker Punch, at Blizzard, at Epic Games, quoting their social media posts and drawing attention to the silences of people who refuse to condemn this violent rhetoric. She insists
this unhinged behavior is completely rampant across the Western gaming industry,
when in fact she has very little actual proof of this being widespread. But that doesn't matter, because her little archive of corruption proves her claim to her and her audience. Let's ignore the fact that a bunch of high-profile right-wing figures were calling for war immediately after the Charlie Kirk shooting, when no political affiliation or even information at all was available on the shooter, but that's not important. That's not important at all. Background NPC goes on and out of her way to name specific names of developers in the video to her massive inflammatory audience.
Take Donnie Torrey, who is a senior QA analyst at Psionic Studios, or Kate, who is a localizer for Square Enix. Again, keep in mind, these are people using their legal names.
as well as promote the Charlie Tweets Detected Steam groups, which categorizes game devs who supposedly tweet bad things about the definitely not Nazi man. All of this stuff mirrors the McCarthy-era naming names project, when lists of suspected communists circulated in pamphlets and hearings. Michelle Nickerson again documents how conservative women in the US distributed lists of subversive organizations to protect their family. These people love their fucking list. The Charlie list, the SBI detected list, Smash JT's homophobic, anti-Semitic Kotaku detected list, Charlie Kirk's Professor Watch list, which has led to countless harassment. Like, these people love their fucking lists. She just does random shit like this all the time, sowing the seeds of doubt against people in the industry like some weird Alex Jones level conspiracy. Her framing likes to lean heavily on betrayal, again, like here.
There used to be a time when you could generally trust what the industry professionals were telling you. When a studio said they hadn't changed something, they hadn't changed it. But somewhere along the way, that started to change.
Cataloging is intentionally framed as defense against deception and corruption. Her and others are not witch hunting, they insist, but simply refusing to be lied to. Like the Cold War pamphlets or the Nazi local surveillance work, her list transformed vigilance into moral duty. This feeds into a deep hypocrisy that runs through her videos in constantly wanting grace extended to her side, but not those that she finds impure.
The industry deflects legitimate criticism by labeling it as toxicity. It's a perfect way to avoid addressing the real problems with their products.
She goes on and on about studios and creators policing organic thought and stifling organic expression, and then just goes to openly celebrate DC writers being fired for their comments on Charlie Kirk.
I'll even praise DC Comics. When one of their writers was caught promoting more violent rhetoric, they didn't issue a vague apology, they fired her. They canceled her entire Red Hood project, which apparently already sucked, to no one's surprise, then refunded readers who had purchased it already, then made a public statement condemning the behavior. Great job, DC.
For the record, this is what the writer said, and I think that's pretty funny and also not entirely wrong. And anybody mad at this, but not mad that, oh, I don't know, George Floyd jokes are still being made 5 years later, needs to shut the fuck up. Oh, and in case you're wondering, yeah, she absolutely does try to convince you that this isn't really about censorship. It's about not making a hostile environment, particularly if you're in charge. Because, for an example, she doesn't like that the CEO of Epic Games, Tim Sweeney, doesn't want to censor or fire people for having a wrong opinion.
This is not about government censorship. It is about your employees and everybody else on the internet publicly cheering and celebrating someone's death and creating a hostile environment for anyone who disagrees.
Wait a minute. I thought that we didn't like being corrected.
Mainstream entertainment has become more about correcting and grounding the audience instead of just entertaining them.
Oh, wait. Duh, my bad. I totally forgot it's fine to do it for something that you don't like. Oh my God. Crazy. This is why, for example, she doesn't admonish her maker Asmongold for saying things like live ammo should be used by the illegally deployed military on American citizen protesters.
I think, yeah, that base. No, I think, again, I've said this before, I think they should use actual ammo. And if anybody throws a rock or tries to harm one of the police officers, I think they should just use deadly force to stop it from happening. There's no reason why anybody should be putting up with that. And it's disgusting, honestly, that there's so many people that are okay with it. Yeah, shoot on sight. Absolutely.
I mean, shit, I guess since, you know, he's responsible for her having any form of platform whatsoever, that would be kind of bad for business. Oh, did I not mention that yet? Like, that's why she's popular. You know, just like all of these other women who are propped up as useful tools by shitty men, he watched one of her videos and directed his minions to subscribe to her, which took her from a mere 300 subs on the 2-month-old channel she had to over 100,000 in 4 days.
There's 1,300 days. All right. See, guys? Good job. Yeah, keep doing it. Keep going. There you go, guys.
Now.
And then, you know, watched more and more. And now she's signed on with this Talon org. Her audience is his audience, by the way. That's why they are so astute at picking up the cultural impurity core vibes that she is putting down.
Just like rot, if they are allowed to stay and fester, they will continue to spread dysfunction and decay everywhere that they go.
Because you can do one of two things. You cannot challenge the left.
That's
and
right.
let them do their thing.
And then they're going to just run you over, and eventually when they get power, they're going to crush you.
Or you can utterly confront them and defeat them. And
you destroy them completely. Destroy everything about them. Put the mayors in jail. Put the governors up on the Insurrection Act for sedition. Put all of the people that were doing the shit in front of the detention centers. Put them in mandatory prison labor camps.
Which they frequently show that they absolutely love. For example, like when they openly cheered when the topic of the Nazis burning down the Magnus Hirschfeld Institute of Sexology in Nazi Germany in 1933 came up on Asmongold's stream.
Let us remember that the Nazis burned the books that the Nazis burned books on gender sciences.
They did do that.
First. Now the administration has villainized and marginalized migrant workers, trans.
It's a bit of a miss. Like, my understanding is that they burned them not because it was gender stuff, but because it was written in Jewish and not German. And it was like a retaking of Germany for Germans. That was like the uprising of the Nazis.
Anyways, Asmongold brings us nicely into our next section. One of the oldest gamer copes that align with this reactionary rhetoric is of course the wombo combo of the uglification of women and the demasculinization of men. Beauty is a reflection of cultural health after all. Remember that earlier? In her video, Western games are doomed, is one example of her doing the thing her and others frequently do, where beauty is elevated into a moral principle.
Attractive, beautiful characters that aren't trying to check boxes, but are just trying to draw the player in and add to their experience and enjoyment. No intentional nerfing of their looks, no agendas, no ulterior motives, no nonsense. Just good-looking, pretty, attractive characters and designs. And I've said this before, but I don't understand why this is so hard for Western developers. Stop making your characters less attractive on purpose.
I really do love the assertion that people are making video game characters ugly because it's their agenda. Like, it's so goofy. Beauty to these people is not a matter of taste, but of truth. To design attractive characters is to honor and respect the players, and to render them less than conventionally attractive is an objective moral failing. This very nicely ties into the propaganda and contamination segment because there is obvious implications that these ugly characters are being made maliciously with nefarious plans to turn everyone black and gay. Shout out racism and homophobia. It really is kind of amazing how the people in the comments of these videos really like lap up her delivery, but from, you know, the same place that says that Stellar Blade has an intellectual story, I'm honestly not surprised about these assertions. And to be clear, this isn't just about making fake women be less breedable. The men also get their own curiously worded laments as well, as I have shown.
Because this was never about everyone. It was about taking things that were created with a male audience in mind, things that they loved, that they built identities around, and completely destroying them, while scorning the very people who made them successful.
Does anyone else love men? Wow, I love men so much. I love uncritical masculinity and how it can't be problematic in any way whatsoever.
When you create something with love instead of contempt, audiences feel it. When you celebrate masculinity instead of deconstructing it, men respond. It is not complicated, it just requires basic respect. At the end of the day, this is not just about entertainment. This is about the kind of culture we're building for ourselves and future generations.
This is about the kind of culture we're building for ourselves and future generations is a pretty wild thing to say for someone who seems to have a hard time watching anything outside of media for 13-year-old boys. I really love when her facade cracks a little bit and the fascism leaks out, like with overt phrasing advocating for the cultural health of the world, because she doesn't like that the sequel's Luke Skywalker was actually written quite well. People like her just don't actually want men to show what it's like to have pain and deal with struggle in a non-fake fantasy unhealthy kind of way. That's why in her video about men that, she talked about her liking, it was about men performing struggle through a stoic sacrifice, even at the cost of their own humanity. Very curious framing, one might think. This endless oversimplification of media to hammer in these illusions is frequently done when she talks about older stuff as well. Once again, equating the aesthetic feel with a cultural wellness of the message that is being expressed. Because remember, beauty is not only for the person, but for the medium itself. And she reinforces this through her endless reliance on nostalgia baiting, like in a section of this video where she shows her shallow understanding of media and says a bunch of shit about old movies that she clearly doesn't seem to understand.
All got excited about books and learning without making a statement about empowerment. Hercules was incredibly strong and heroic without feeling guilty about it, and Rapunzel could dream about floating lanterns without anyone questioning if her goals were big enough.
Once again, the endless opposition to modernist distortion by framing it as degeneracy is used by all of these people in the past and the background NPC right fucking now. Aesthetics are not preferences to these people. They are literal moral battlegrounds. Beauty is purity, deviation is decay. And all of this is wrapped up so carefully in the most important aesthetic of all, which is hers. The tone, good lord, I just can't get over this tone, dude. Like, she really reminds me of a Sunday school teacher that I had when I was a kid who was obviously very nice to adults when they were around and respectful to us kids as well, but a literal demon when it was just us little ones. That is really what kind of gets me about all of this. She never rants, she never sneers, she mourns, she dotes, she slathers on that maternal concern heavier than a mother you know is gonna beat your ass when you are behind closed doors. Shout out to my childhood. Her closing words in the Kirkle video explicitly turn to scripture and fully bring out this concerning aesthetic full force.
John 8:12. Again, Jesus spoke to them saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. And John 1:5. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it.
Have I mentioned that she uses scripture when convenient? I legitimately don't remember because I've been talking for a while, but she does that, so yay. Oh, and she snuck in Luke 45 at the beginning, by the way, just wanted to throw that out. First of all, this biblical edition frames her critique as more than simple consumer commentary. It is an even deeper layer of moral testimony, part of a cosmic struggle between light and dark, good and evil. That shallow binary dynamic is something that is deeply integral to conservative, reactionary, and fascist beliefs, and something that she loves to remind us is important to her, like in her fascinatingly shallow interpretation of K-pop Demon Hunters.
When you look at the overarching themes of this movie, it brings you back to the basics. An objective good versus objective evil. Heroes who sacrifice for something greater, not just a story about finding yourself. Redemption and overcoming deep-rooted shame.
This absolution as to good and evil is also why her brain somehow thinks people making jokes about Charlie Kirk dying is more important than the legacy of a man who built his life off of rhetorical violence and hate speech. To her, he is an objective good, and he did what was necessary to achieve the goals of accomplishing that good, regardless of how much she actually knows or understands about him and the ways that he operated. Her affect make everything, all of this hit different than some loser in their fucking apartment raging about black people in video games. And I think one could make the assumption that she is very much aware of this, which is why she does it. To be clear, something like this isn't inherently problematic in a vacuum. A lot of people ham it up or have characters for the camera, unlike yours truly, who is naturally like this for better or worse. But when you're talking about shit like, oh, I don't know, everything that I've gone over today, that is where I get a little itty bitty bit suspicious about all of this. In a QA she did recently, she said she's been training to be a voice actor for 4 years. She also has a day job in marketing, and also her husband, sorry fellas, used to be a Twitch streamer, which also helps to explain the setup. So she is absolutely built to be doing this. I mean, just looking at the Wayback Machine at her start, like nobody starts out with descriptions as well fleshed out as this if they don't immediately understand how all of this stuff works. I also work in marketing, which is why I felt very suspicious about her coming out of the woodwork with such refinement in her aesthetic and her delivery, and then mysteriously hitting 100,000 subscribers in under 2 months thanks to Asmongold's very normal audience somehow finding her channel. Her videos feel like they have been actually tailored with marketing data to have all of the good topical gamer words and talking points delivered in just the right way to appeal to exactly the kind of audience she was aiming to get. There's very clear, tailored effort being put into her aesthetic, as is the case with many others. She is very much trying to feel like an overtly caring human being while spouting this garbage.
Okay, I'm getting the blanket back out for this one. It is pretty wild to be in the business of making games for a living, something that's inherently supposed to be fun and engaging, an escape for consumers, and somehow put yourselves in a situation where you're preparing for backlash over things that you intentionally acknowledged, chose to do, and could have completely avoided. It's like knowing the future, but still making the decisions that led to your death.
But I've seen this shit way too many times, and that's why, to me, her content feels anything but human. Another great example of this is how Legendary Drops tries to come off as brave and stoic and valorous despite literally just blowing hot air and lying behind a microphone.
This might sound like it's coming out of left field, but I think that game developers need to disconnect from politics. Western studios, man, they just can't get their shit together.
But to these people, it fucking works, because these people who watch this shit aren't equipped with the knowledge to see through these facades that are literally just lying to them. That's why this shit works. It makes her critique sound apolitical and moral, even as it intentionally uses deeply political arguments. And she is not an isolated figure, but part of a larger constellation of women's voices packaging reaction in soft aesthetics. From Nazi Germany to Cold War mothers to trad wives and pastel conspiracy theorists today, this is far from a new phenomenon, but the topic is one of deep obscurity, which is, in my opinion, a big fucking problem. You may have noticed that I have spent almost none of this video actually debunking anything she says. Do you know why? It's very simple, actually, because treating anything that someone like this says as worth being debated in the marketplace of ideas is an immediate L. Engaging with this hateful, racist, sexist, blatantly dishonest rhetoric as if it is worth any amount of consideration at all is the exact same shit that made Charlie Kirk popular enough to get killed, and the brain rot that is just circulating in some people mourning his death. There is so much outrage for a man who was just trying to have conversations and trying to speak his mind from these kinds of people because they want you to believe that any and all of their Kirkian-coded rhetorical sewage is valid to debate. And to be clear, debunking and shit isn't like inherently bad or useless, but let's be careful with just how much attention we give some people. And also, like, can we just stop making critical drinker videos? Like, please. The danger of the background NPC's commentary in particular is not simply that she repeats the same old anti-reality talking points that have been around for forever, is that she does so specifically in a register that feels disarming, maternal, and ordinary in a social landscape entirely unfit to interpret how and what she is really saying. If I'm being honest here, it really is true of basically all people watching all apolitical content, whether or not they're weaponizing the guise of harmless femininity. Like the pleas for common sense, the metaphors for decay, beauty, normalcy, purity, and propaganda are like really anything but new. They're the same old reactionary and fascist vocabularies that have been deployed by these dorks, but what makes them continually effective is their familiarity and how they masquerade as common sense because we are not taught about how this works. We live in a society reference, that never taught us how to hear this kind of language or understand this kind of process. In schools, like, fascism is presented as this aesthetic of spectacle and violence, the uniforms, the rallies, the genocide, rather than a set of rhetorical patterns that moralize purity, beauty, and cultural decay under the guise of common sense. The Nazi past is flattened into larger-than-life villains instead of being recognized as a communication strategy that naturalized authoritarianism through everyday speech and actions. And likewise, Phyllis Schlafly is remembered as probably no more than a quirky relic, if even remembered at all, and not as the architect of kind of how anti-feminism and advocating against women's issues could be sold as protection and common sense rather than an attack on actual rights of women. When we fail to teach how fascism talks, we make it very easy for the same linguistic patterns to reappear in the most unassuming of places. Because that's how they slip past critical filters. When all of this rhetoric shows up in depressing cupcake videos or the soft-voiced laments of a gamer girl, to the unfamiliar, it doesn't register as political as intended. It feels wholesome, it feels relatable, it feels safe, and that is entirely the fucking point. Because fascism's survival strategy has always been effective camouflage. It speaks to the voice of the normal person, the dutiful mother, or even the nostalgic fan. That's why it never demands violence at first. It simply demands agreement, conformity, and pity. Toss in some protection in there, so that way when violence does eventually come about, it seems justified as a reluctant measure to keep order. Exactly like the US president is doing right now.
Mind up on Chicago though?
Well, we're going in. I didn't say when, we're going in. When you lose, look, I have an obligation. This isn't a political thing. I have an obligation.
And the background NPC shows us just how easily this logic is perpetuated in pandering gaming videos. Remember, her videos aren't about politics, as she loves to remind us. They are about decency. They are about respect and beauty. Yet those terms are very obviously doing political work. They reproduce a worldview in which feminism, diversity, and the ever-important modernity are coded as corruption, where traditional values and views of the world are imagined as normalcy and purity. And with her voice, the soft affect of care becomes the perfect vessel for convincing gamers that fascism will definitely make video game women hotter and video games less expensive if they just get everyone fired who makes jokes about the Nazi dying instead of jokes about black and trans people dying.
Great job, DC.
Fascist language does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it dotes, sometimes it giggles and laments. It arrives disguised as common sense for normal people. And unless we begin to teach media literacy that includes rhetorical literacy, how metaphors of rot, purity and beauty have been weaponized, these patterns will continue to circulate near untouched, mistaken for common sense or simple aesthetic preference or just an opinion. And we will keep getting fascists put in place of power and influence, big and small. From Nazi Germany's guardians of morality to Cold War mothers' warning of communist Hollywood to Phyllis Schlafly's real rights of women to today's trad wives, pastel conspiracies, and gamer genocide girlies, the soft voice of reaction has proven remarkably durable. What unites these figures is not only the content of the politics, but their form. Sorrow instead of rage, decency instead of aggression, moral common sense instead of overt ideology. And the background NPC is simply the latest adaptation of this rhetorical tradition, bringing it much more openly into the dorkiest culture you can imagine. And that's what's so weird and spooky about all of this, is that fascism rarely appears in fancy uniforms anymore. In fact, fascism's probably the least well-dressed it's ever been, which is like kind of a bummer for me as a fashion guy. These days, it oftentimes arrives in a cozy sweater with a Shure microphone and purple background lighting. It appears to normal people. It laments about the decline and betrayal in children's media and mediocre video games. And because we're not taught how to recognize it, it continues to bloom in the most unlikely of places. In homemaking reels, in fandoms, and even in the voices of our precious gamer girls. It is ridiculous. And that's the fucking point, because the ridiculous is exactly where this shit thrives. Also, the Crusades were all failures, the fourth leading to the dissolution of them, and do you really want to claim the Children's Crusade as being something cool? Do you really want to rep child slavery? Like, you do you, I guess, but yikes. Thank you for watching. This took a long time. Patreon people are scrolling. I love you. I'm going to talk about my opinions on Charlie Kirk now. I hope you're ready. Okay. I think that people simply just saying that I don't like political violence is such a level zero take. It's fucking stupid. Nobody really likes political violence. To anybody. I think Charlie Kirk fucking sucks, and I didn't want to see him get killed, because that means that shit is really fucking bad if we're at the point of literal assassinations, okay? Like, political violence bad is not a real opinion. It doesn't matter if you think Charlie Kirk deserved it or not. That is entirely irrelevant. What is relevant is whether you believe that hate speech actually has consequences. Because if you spend any amount of extended time actually listening to what Charlie said and did in his life, you would see that he built his livelihood off of hate speech, rage farming, and putting content into the ether to make people mad and radicalized. He is so responsible for a lot of the vitriol in the last, I don't know, like 10 years with everything. Like, his organization was so fucking important and he was the figurehead. So I think, even though it's pretty spooky scary, that him being killed by a victim of the radicalization that he helped heralded as one of the most influential political pundits of the last 10 fucking years isn't really that surprising. And to have a little bit of perspective, I think, on why maybe people are cracking jokes about this, people crack jokes about fucking everything these days. That's the only thing that we can do to have a little bit of levity in the world that is continually collapsing and horrifying. But also, there's probably people, you know, who are obviously on the opposite side of Charlie Kirk's political sphere, who are maybe for a small moment in time taking a little bit of solace that it was a white supremacist who got killed instead of another child or another trans person, or another black person, because it sure seems like, for some reason, people only care about political violence when it affects someone in power and not the hundreds and thousands of people that are killed around the world every day, but just don't have giant platforms for people to really give a shit about. Because the elites care about it, the influencers and the podcasters and everybody at that level care about it more because they think that could be fucking them up there. They think that that could be them dying one day for shit that they said. But they shouldn't have to worry about that if they're not literally spewing white nationalist fucking rhetoric. At least that's what I would like to say if we weren't in a complete radicalization hellhole right now, and who knows who else could get killed. Like, it just sucks. Like, it's just bad. But Charlie Kirk was responsible for making so much of the environment that we live in now, for maybe even radicalizing you if you've somehow made it to the end of this video despite hating almost everything I said. I don't like Charlie Kirk. I didn't want him to die, but I'm not going to lose sleep over a literal hate monger getting fucking murdered instead of more people who are, oh, I don't know, not fucking millionaires living in poverty, struggling to get by and being persecuted because of their identities. Like, grow the fuck up. Like, hate speech has consequences. If you seriously believe that, you should be able to understand why Charlie Kirk was killed. Okay? Straight up. Congratulations. I've given you my opinion. You may now put it inside of yourself and take it as yours. I give you that blessing. You are very welcome. Yeah, this took a while. I was sick for like weeks and didn't have a voice. I have to poop now. I'm gonna go. Goodbye.